The palace of Arcelis was built from shining stone that caught the light of 3 suns. Towers rose high, banners swayed in the warm wind, and from the outside everything seemed perfect. But inside those silver walls lived a truth no one dared to speak too loudly. Their beloved Princess Vera, the jewel of the Empire, was broken. Once, she had been the strongest of them all. Vera had trained in the great gardens with a sword at her side. She was tall, proud, and fearless. As a child, she had run faster than her guards. As a young woman, she had stood in front of soldiers, showing them how to fight. Her laughter had once been so bright that the palace rang with joy, but then came the illness. It began as a quiet ache in her chest. She had ignored it at first, thinking it was nothing, but soon the pain sharpened. Her ribs began to twist, pressing against her lungs, pressing against her heart. Every step hurt. Every breath was fire. At first, she tried to hide it. She still walked with her people, still sat on the throne beside her father, still smiled when the songs were sung in her honor. But behind the doors of her chamber, she would clutch her chest and gasp for air, praying no one could hear. The pain grew worse each year. She no longer trained with a sword. She no longer joined festivals. She no longer ran in the gardens she had once loved. The girl who had been called the Jewel of Arcelis now walked only with the help of servants, and some days she could not walk at all. The whispers began. "She is cursed," one voice murmured in the shadow of the hall. "She cannot even stand for long. How can she rule?" Another whispered. "A princess who cannot walk is no princess at all," a cruel one muttered. And though the people loved her, love was not enough to silence the doubt. To rule an empire, one needed strength. But their princess could not even carry her own body without pain. Vera heard the whispers. She always heard them, and though she pretended they did not matter, each word was a blade cutting deep into her heart. In the evenings, she sat by her window, staring at the stars. She remembered the girl she used to be, the one who had believed she could lead her people to greatness. Now she was trapped, a prisoner inside her own body. Her father, the Emperor, searched for healers across the galaxy. Physicians from distant worlds came, bringing strange medicines, glowing tools, and promises of cures. They pressed their hands against her chest. They spoke in languages she did not know. They gave her bitter drinks and injected her with burning liquids. Nothing worked. Every healer left with the same words. Her ribs cannot be fixed. She will live, but she will not be whole. Her mother wept when she thought Vera was not looking. Her father grew cold and silent, carrying the weight of a kingdom that needed hope. And Vera began to lose her light. She felt like a burden, a useless symbol draped in fine silks, a princess in name only. Some nights she cried until her body shook, and the pain grew worse because of it. She wished she could tear her ribs out with her own hands. She wished she could be free of the fire inside her chest, but she never showed her tears to her people. No matter how much it hurt, she stood tall when she had to be seen. She forced her lips into a smile. She raised her chin. She pretended to be unbroken, because if her people saw her fall, then the empire itself might fall with her. And so the days passed. And so the pain grew, until the day the humans came. They were newcomers to the Alliance of Worlds, strange creatures from a blue planet far from the galactic core. The people of Arcelis saw them as fragile, soft-skinned, weak, yet they were clever. They built machines quickly, and they had ideas no one else had thought of. When a healer from Earth asked to see the princess, many laughed. A human? What could a human do that our greatest doctors could not? But Vera's father was desperate. He had no more choices left. He allowed the request. Vera sat in her chamber that day, wrapped in silver cloth, her body stiff with pain. She expected another disappointment, another set of hands that would prod her chest and leave with pity in their eyes. She had grown tired of hope. The doors opened, and there he was, a human man. His name was Daniel. He was not dressed in royal silks nor in the glowing robes of alien healers. His clothes were simple. His face was plain, but his eyes carried something she had not seen before. Not pity, not pride, something else, respect. He bowed, not like a doctor greeting a patient, not like a servant to a queen. He bowed like one soul bowing to another, and then he said something so simple it cut through all the noise that had filled her life. "I don't give up, and pain deserves mercy." Vera stared at him. The words seemed strange. No one had spoken to her like that before. Every healer before him had called her condition impossible. Every whisper around her had called her broken. But this human spoke as though her suffering was not a curse, not a weakness, but something that deserved to be lifted. For the first time in years, Princess Vera felt a spark of something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. The palace of Arcelis was built from shining stone that caught the light of 3 suns. Towers rose high, banners swayed in the warm wind, and from the outside everything seemed perfect. But inside those silver walls lived a truth no one dared to speak too loudly. Their beloved Princess Vera, the jewel of the empire, was broken. Once, she had been the strongest of them all. Vera had trained in the great gardens with a sword at her side. She was tall, proud, and fearless. As a child, she had run faster than her guards. As a young woman, she had stood in front of soldiers showing them how to fight. Her laughter had once been so bright that the palace rang with joy. But then came the illness. It began as a quiet ache in her chest. She had ignored it at first, thinking it was nothing, but soon the pain sharpened. Her ribs began to twist, pressing against her lungs, pressing against her heart. Every step hurt. Every breath was fire. At first, she tried to hide it. She still walked with her people, still sat on the throne beside her father, still smiled when the songs were sung in her honor. But behind the doors of her chamber, she would clutch her chest and gasp for air, praying no one could hear. The pain grew worse each year. She no longer trained with a sword. She no longer joined festivals. She no longer ran in the gardens she had once loved. The girl who had been called the jewel of Arcelis now walked only with the help of servants, and some days she could not walk at all. The whispers began. "She is cursed," one voice murmured in the shadow of the hall. "She cannot even stand for long. How can she rule?" Another whispered. "A princess who cannot walk is no princess at all," a cruel one muttered. And though the people loved her, love was not enough to silence the doubt. To rule an empire, one needed strength. But their princess could not even carry her own body without pain. Vera heard the whispers. She always heard them, and though she pretended they did not matter, each word was a blade cutting deep into her heart. In the evenings, she sat by her window, staring at the stars. She remembered the girl she used to be, the one who had believed she could lead her people to greatness. Now she was trapped, a prisoner inside her own body. Her father, the emperor, searched for healers across the galaxy. Physicians from distant worlds came, bringing strange medicines, glowing tools, and promises of cures. They pressed their hands against her chest. They spoke in languages she did not know. They gave her bitter drinks and injected her with burning liquids. Nothing worked. Every healer left with the same words. Her ribs cannot be fixed. She will live, but she will not be whole. Her mother wept when she thought Vera was not looking. Her father grew cold and silent, carrying the weight of a kingdom that needed hope. And Vera began to lose her light. She felt like a burden, a useless symbol draped in fine silks, a princess in name only. Some nights she cried until her body shook, and the pain grew worse because of it. She wished she could tear her ribs out with her own hands. She wished she could be free of the fire inside her chest, but she never showed her tears to her people. No matter how much it hurt, she stood tall when she had to be seen. She forced her lips into a smile. She raised her chin. She pretended to be unbroken, because if her people saw her fall, then the empire itself might fall with her. And so the days passed. And so the pain grew, until the day the humans came. They were newcomers to the alliance of worlds, strange creatures from a blue planet far from the galactic core. The people of Arcelis saw them as fragile, soft-skinned, weak, yet they were clever. They built machines quickly, and they had ideas no one else had thought of. When a healer from Earth asked to see the princess, many laughed. A human? What could a human do that our greatest doctors could not? But Vera's father was desperate. He had no more choices left. He allowed the request. Vera sat in her chamber that day, wrapped in silver cloth, her body stiff with pain. She expected another disappointment, another set of hands that would prod her chest and leave with pity in their eyes. She had grown tired of hope. The doors opened, and there he was, a human man. His name was Daniel. He was not dressed in royal silks nor in the glowing robes of alien healers. His clothes were simple, his face was plain, but his eyes carried something she had not seen before. Not pity, not pride. Something else, respect. He bowed not like a doctor greeting a patient, not like a servant to a queen. He bowed like one soul bowing to another, and then he said something so simple it cut through all the noise that had filled her life. I don't give up. And pain deserves mercy. Vera stared at him. The words seemed strange. No one had spoken to her like that before. Every healer before him had called her condition impossible. Every whisper around her had called her broken. But this human spoke as though her suffering was not a curse, not a weakness, but something that deserved to be lifted. For the first time in years, Princess Vera felt a spark of something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. The next morning, the palace halls buzzed with whispers. Servants carried food trays with nervous hands, and guards exchanged doubtful glances. The news had already spread. The human healer had been allowed to treat Princess Vera. Some called it desperation, others foolishness. But none dared speak too loudly. Inside her private chamber, Vera sat upright on her long cushioned seat. She wore a flowing gown of soft blue silk, though it did little to hide the sharp lines of her ribs beneath. Every breath still burned, but she forced her face to remain calm. A princess must never let her pain show. Daniel entered quietly, carrying his small case of tools. He was not escorted this time. Vera had demanded privacy. The guards outside had looked uneasy, but no one disobeyed her. As he stepped forward, Daniel offered a small bow. Good morning, Princess. Her eyes narrowed. You return so soon? Pain doesn't rest, he replied softly. So neither will I. For a moment, her lips almost curved into a smile. Almost. But she quickly straightened her posture. She could not let him see how those words touched her. Daniel opened his case and pulled out simple objects. Strips of cloth, small wooden rods, and a humming device with faint light at its tip. They looked unimpressive compared to the glowing alien machines she had seen before. Yet Daniel's hands moved with quiet confidence, as though he trusted these tools more than gold or jewels. Today I will examine your ribs more carefully, he said, his tone calm, respectful, but only if you allow it. Again, that strange question. If you allow it, her heart tightened. No healer had ever asked before. They had always commanded, always assumed. But Daniel waited, his hand still, his gaze steady, as if her choice truly mattered. You may, she said finally, her voice low. He stepped closer. For the first time, his hands touched her. Gentle, careful, yet firm enough to guide. His fingers pressed along her side, feeling the curve of her twisted ribs. The moment he touched her, pain shot through her body like lightning. A sharp hiss escaped her lips. Her hand gripped the arm of her chair, nails digging into the wood. Every muscle tensed. Immediately, Daniel pulled back, his face filled with concern. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause more pain. Her eyes widened slightly. She had expected him to keep pressing, to ignore her cries as so many doctors had done before. But no, he stopped. He listened. It is fine, she managed to whisper, trying to catch her breath. Do what you must. Daniel shook his head gently. No, Princess. Healing is not about forcing. It is about patience. If I push too hard, your body will fight me. I will move slowly and you will tell me when it is too much. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She stared at him, stunned. No one had ever spoken like that to her. Not her doctors, not even her parents. Everyone else had treated her like a puzzle to solve or a burden to fix. But this human spoke as if she were still in control, as if she had a choice. Her throat ached. She whispered, You speak as though my voice matters. Daniel looked at her firmly. It does. Her chest tightened, though not from pain. Something warm flickered inside her, something she had not felt in years. She gave a small nod. Then, continue. He placed his hands again, slower this time, pressing carefully along her ribs. His touch was steady, his movements precise. He explained as he worked, how her ribs pressed against her lungs, how the muscles around them had weakened, how her body had begun to fight itself. He spoke in simple words, patient and clear, and for the first time, she understood her own suffering, not as a curse, not as a punishment from the stars, but as something her body could fight against. Still, the pain was sharp. Several times she gasped, tears filling her eyes. Her pride begged her to hide them, but Daniel's gentle voice broke through her defenses. "Breathe," he whispered, slowly in and out. "You are not alone in this pain." Her tears slipped down her cheeks. Her hands trembled, but she did as he asked, taking shaky breaths while his steady hands worked along her chest. When he finally stepped back, she was exhausted, her body trembling, but something inside her had shifted. For the first time in years, she did not feel like a broken object. She felt seen. Daniel packed his tools away. His voice was calm, almost tender. "That is enough for today. Healing is not a single step. It is many small ones, but you took the first step today." Vera swallowed hard. She wanted to speak, to thank him, but pride held her tongue. Instead, she simply looked away, brushing her tears quickly before they could stain her cheeks. But Daniel had already seen them. He did not mention them. He did not shame her. He only gave a small bow and said, "Rest, princess. Tomorrow we begin again." As he walked toward the door, Vera's voice called softly behind him, almost without her realizing. "Daniel." He turned, waiting. Her lips trembled, but she forced the words out. "You are different from the others." A faint smile touched his face. "I'm not here to prove I'm different. I'm here to help you walk again." And then he was gone, leaving her alone in the quiet chamber. Vera sat in silence, her heart racing. For years she had lived with despair as her only companion. But now, because of a human's touch, a human's words, she felt something dangerous, something fragile, yet alive, hope. The days that followed were not easy for Princess Vera. Healing, she soon discovered, was not a gentle path. It was a battlefield, and her own body was the enemy. Every morning, Daniel entered her chamber with his small case of human tools. He greeted her with the same calm voice. "Good morning, Princess. Are you ready?" Some mornings she nodded quietly. Other mornings she wanted to scream at him to leave. But he never forced her. He waited, patient as stone, until she gave her answer. And when she agreed, the work began. Daniel's methods were strange compared to alien healers. He did not use glowing machines or powerful medicines. Instead, he relied on his hands, his eyes, and his strange human devices. He stretched her arms gently, moved her body into painful positions, and pressed against her ribs with careful strength. At first, it was unbearable. Each session left Vera shaking, her gown damp with sweat, her throat raw from gasping. She cursed him under her breath, whispered that he was cruel, that he was torturing her. But Daniel never grew angry. He only said softly, "I know it hurts, but pain is part of the fight, and you are not fighting alone." Those words stayed with her. Still, there were nights when Vera broke. Alone in her chamber, she lay curled in her bed, clutching her ribs, sobbing until her voice was gone. She wished she could return to the days when she had been strong, when her body had obeyed her. She hated herself for being weak, for needing a human to guide her like a child learning to walk again. One evening, when the pain was too much, she cried out during a session. "Stop, enough!" She shoved his hands away, her eyes blazing with tears. "I cannot do this. You are asking too much from me. I am not strong enough." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Daniel looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then he knelt down, his eyes level with hers. "Vera," he said quietly, "I have seen soldiers lose their limbs. I have seen children born unable to walk, and I have seen them rise because they refuse to quit. You are stronger than you believe, but the only way you will see it is if you keep fighting." Her lip trembled. Anger and sorrow battled inside her. She wanted to hate him for his words, but deep down she knew they were true. Her pride cracked and she whispered, "But I am afraid." Daniel's voice softened even more. "So am I. Every time I treat someone, I am afraid I will fail. But fear doesn't mean you stop. Fear means you care enough to keep going." Her eyes filled with tears again. Slowly, she nodded, but then, one morning, she noticed something. She had risen from her bed without needing two servants to lift her. The pain was still there, but it no longer crushed her completely. She stood for a moment longer than before, and so the struggle continued. Day by day, Daniel pushed her further. He made her hold herself upright longer. He pressed against her ribs until she could breathe deeper. He gave her exercises that made her arms and back ache. Each small task felt like climbing a mountain, and sometimes she thought she would collapse before reaching the top. But Daniel never let her fall. He was always there, his hand steady, his voice guiding. "Breathe, Vera, one step more. You can do this." At first, progress was invisible. Weeks passed and she still felt the same pain, still struggled to move. Doubt gnawed at her heart. Was she foolish to believe this human could help? Daniel noticed too. His face lit with a smile when she told him. "That is progress," he said firmly. "Never doubt small victories, Princess. They are the stones that build the path." The word sank into it was a small change, but to her it was everything. Her soul. For the first time, she began to believe that perhaps her body was not her prison forever. Perhaps she truly could fight back. Yet the struggle was not only in her body, it was in her heart. One evening after a long session, Vera sat by her window. The stars of Arcelis shone brightly, scattered across the sky. She thought of the girl she used to be, the warrior princess full of laughter and strength. And she thought of the whispers that had haunted her for years. Broken, useless, weak, her hands clenched. Tears blurred her vision. She whispered into the night, "I am not broken. Not anymore." Behind her, Daniel's quiet voice answered. She hadn't realized he was still there. "No," he said gently. "You never were," her breath caught. She turned to look at him. For a moment, words failed her. And then, for the first time in years, she allowed herself to truly smile. It was small, fragile, but real. Daniel returned the smile, but his eyes carried determination. "This is only the beginning. The road ahead is long, but you are walking it now, Vera. One painful step at a time." She nodded, wiping her tears. "Then I will keep walking, even if it takes my whole life." And so the struggle of healing continued, painful, merciless, exhausting. But now, for the first time in years, Princess Vera fought not out of duty, not out of pride, but out of hope. A hope lit by human hands. The palace had grown used to the sight of Daniel walking the silver halls each morning. At first, people had mocked him quietly, calling him the desperate emperor's last gamble. But as weeks turned into months, their laughter grew softer. The princess had begun to change. Slowly, painfully, but undeniably. She could stand longer. She could take more breaths without gasping. She could even rise from her chair with less help than before. These were small things, but in the eyes of her people it was a miracle. Yet behind the progress, the pain never left. Every session with Daniel tore at Vera's body. He pressed her ribs, stretched her arms, forced her to breathe deeply when her chest felt like it was filled with knives. Her body trembled, sweat poured down her face, and sometimes she cried openly despite her pride. And though Daniel's voice was steady, always calm, always encouraging, the struggle wore her down. One evening, the breaking point came. Daniel had asked her to walk a few steps across the chamber. Just a few. Something so small, yet to her body it felt like crossing a mountain. She rose shakily from her chair, each rib groaning in protest. She took one step. Pain flared in her chest. Another step. Her vision blurred. By the third step, her legs gave way. She collapsed to the marble floor with a cry that echoed through the chamber. The sound was raw, full of anguish, breaking through every wall of dignity she had built. Daniel rushed to her side, kneeling quickly. "Vera!" Her hands clutched at her ribs. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She shook her head violently. "No more," she gasped, her voice cracked with despair. "I cannot do this. Do you hear me? I cannot." Her words were not calm, not royal. They were the words of a woman shattered by years of pain. Daniel tried to touch her shoulder, but she pushed his hand away weakly. "Why do you keep forcing me?" she cried. "I am broken. I've always been broken. Nothing you do will change that." The room went quiet except for her sobs. Her pride, her strength, all of it was stripped away. She was just a girl lying on the cold floor, drowning in the weight of her suffering. For a long moment, Daniel did not move. His face was full of sorrow, but not pity. His eyes shone with something deeper. Finally, he spoke, softly, but with a strength that cut through the silence. "Vera, listen to me." She tried to turn away, but his voice held her there. "You are not broken. Do you hear me? Every step you take is proof that you are not broken. Every breath, every fight, every tear. It all proves you are still here, still standing against the pain. Broken things do not fight. Broken things do not rise, but you do, her sobs quieted. His words pierced through the fog of despair. She stared at him through blurred vision, her chest heaving. Daniel's voice grew firmer. I cannot promise the pain will vanish. I cannot promise this road will be easy. But I can promise you this, you are stronger than you know. Stronger than any title, stronger than any throne. You are not weak because you fall. You are strong because you rise again. Her hand trembled. Slowly, without thinking, she reached for his. Her fingers gripped his hand tightly, desperate, as if it were the only anchor keeping her from drowning. For a moment, neither spoke. Her tears dripped onto the marble floor, but Daniel's hand did not let go. Finally, she whispered, her voice breaking, "But I am so tired." Daniel squeezed her hand gently. Then rest. Rest when you must, but do not quit, because the world has told you that you are broken, and I am here to remind you you are not. Something inside her cracked open. The words she had buried for years spilled out in a shaking voice. They all whispered about me, she said. They said I was cursed, that I could not rule, that I was a burden, and I believed them. Every word I believed. Daniel shook his head slowly. His eyes were fierce, burning with conviction. They were wrong. You are not a burden. You are a light, and one day your people will see that again. But first you must see it yourself. Her breath caught. Her chest still burned with pain, but beneath it something else stirred. A spark, a fragile spark of belief. She looked at Daniel, his face so close, his hand holding hers with steady strength. And for the first time she wanted to believe him. Her voice was quiet, almost childlike. Do you really think I can rise again? Daniel's answer came without hesitation. I don't think. I know. Her tears flowed freely now, but they were no longer only tears of sorrow. They were the tears of someone who had been pulled back from the edge of despair. That night, servants found the princess not in her bed, but sitting upright in a chair, Daniel's case at her side. Her face was pale from exhaustion, her eyes red from crying, but there was something different about her. Her spirit had not been crushed. It had been reforged, and though her body was still weak, the fire in her eyes was stronger than it had been in years. The palace was alive with whispers. Word had spread that the human healer's methods were working. The servants saw changes. The guards noticed her longer presence in the courtyards, and even the nobles who once mocked now grew quiet when she entered a room. But no one expected what was about to happen. It was Daniel's idea. You are ready, he told her one morning as golden light filled the chamber. Vera frowned, still uncertain. Ready for what? To walk, Daniel said simply. Not just here outside before your people. Her breath caught. The thought terrified her. For years she had been hidden away, carried in chairs, guarded from eyes that pitied or mocked her. To walk before them on her own fragile legs felt impossible. She shook her head. They will laugh if I fall. Daniel's gaze was calm, steady as always. Then let them laugh. But if you take even one step, they will remember that step forever. A princess who rises when all thought she could not. That is what they will see. His words struck deep. She wanted to believe, and so after days of hesitation she agreed. The day arrived. The great hall was filled with nobles, counselors, and servants. At first they thought it was just another audience with the royal family. But when the emperor himself entered with the human healer at his side, silence swept across the room. Then she appeared. Princess Vera. She wore a flowing gown of deep silver, embroidered with the sigil of her house. Her crown rested lightly on her head, and though her body was thin and fragile, her posture was straighter than it had been in years. Her face was pale, but her eyes were burning with quiet fire. Gasps spread through the crowd. For the first time in many years, she was not carried. She stood on her own. At her side, Daniel remained close, not touching her, but ready if she stumbled. He whispered so only she could hear. One step. That's all. One step at a time, her heart pounded. Pain already stirred in her ribs, sharp and familiar. Her legs trembled under her weight. The hall seemed impossibly long, the stairs of her people like heavy chains. But she remembered his words. You are not broken. She lifted her foot. The marble floor was cold beneath her slipper. She took her first step forward. A hush fell. Her ribs screamed, her chest tightened, but she did not stop. She forced herself to take another step. Her gown swayed with the movement, and her crown glittered under the light. The hall was silent except for the faint echo of her footsteps. 3 steps. 4. 5. Her vision blurred with tears, not just from pain, but from the weight of the moment. She could hear the whispers now. She walks. The princess walks. Some voices trembled with disbelief, others with awe. Her legs wavered, and for a moment it seemed she would collapse. The pain stabbed deep, sharp as knives. But then she felt Daniel's quiet presence beside her, steady as a pillar. He did not touch her, did not steal her triumph, but she knew he was there, and that gave her strength. She gritted her teeth and took another step. By the time she reached the throne steps, her body was trembling all over. Her breaths were shallow, her ribs burning as if on fire. But she had walked. Truly walked. The silence broke. The hall erupted into voices, some crying out in shock, others cheering with joy. Many fell to their knees, tears in their eyes as if they had just seen a miracle. The emperor himself rose from his throne, his eyes wide, his proud composure breaking as tears welled. He stepped forward, his voice shaking. "My daughter." Vera turned her face toward him, and though sweat and tears shone on her cheeks, she smiled faintly. A smile full of victory. She bowed her head slightly. "Father, I told you once I could not rise. But today I rise still." The emperor covered his face, overcome with emotion. For so long he had watched her suffer, powerless to ease her pain. To see her now standing before him on her own legs, it was a moment he would never forget. The nobles and servants bowed deeply, not in pity but in respect. Their whispers had turned into a single truth. The princess had returned, and beside her Daniel looked on silently, pride glimmering in his eyes. He had not done this for glory. He had not done it for reward. He had done it because he believed in her when no one else did. As the crowd cheered, Vera leaned slightly toward him, whispering so only he could hear. "I almost fell." Daniel smiled softly. "But you didn't. That is all that matters." She closed her eyes briefly, letting the sound of her people's cheers wash over her. For the first time in her life, she did not feel cursed. She did not feel broken. She felt like a princess. That night, after the hall had emptied and the palace had grown quiet again, Vera sat by the balcony. The stars above glittered like silver fire, and the city below buzzed with new life, for word of her walk had already spread. Daniel joined her, carrying a small lantern. He placed it beside her and sat down, his presence as calm and steady as always. "You changed everything today," he said quietly. Vera shook her head slowly. "No, you changed me." Daniel looked at her, and for a rare moment his steady composure softened. "I only showed you what was already inside. The strength was always yours." She turned her gaze to the stars, her voice low but filled with wonder. "For the first time, I do not fear tomorrow." Her hand rested gently against her ribs, still aching, still fragile. But the pain no longer defined her. It was part of her, but not the whole of her. For tonight, she was not the broken princess. She was the princess who walked. The days after the walk felt different in the palace. Servants moved with lighter steps. The guards stood taller, and even the air seemed to carry hope. The story of the princess who had once been too weak to rise but now walked again spread across the kingdom like fire. Merchants in the city told the tale. Children imitated her first steps in the streets. Families lit lanterns at night, saying prayers of thanks for their princess's courage. But for Vera, the change was not only in her people, it was inside her. For the first time in her life, she woke each morning with purpose. The pain was still there, sharp and unrelenting at times, but it no longer ruled her. She did not hide from it. She faced it. Every day Daniel guided her. Every day he pushed her limits. Some days she cried again, some days she laughed, but always she tried. And every day she grew a little stronger. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the skies crimson, the emperor called for his daughter and the human healer. They entered the council chamber where the nobles were already gathered. The emperor's voice was deep with pride. "My daughter has shown us a miracle. But it is more than a miracle, it is proof. Proof of her strength, proof of her will, proof that she is worthy to stand as heir." The counselors bowed their heads, some with tears in their eyes. For years they had doubted. Now they could not. Vera looked at her father, her chest tight not with pain but with emotion. "Father, I was weak once. I believed the whispers. I thought myself cursed. But now I see I was never cursed. I was tested. And with his help, she glanced at Daniel, her eyes shining. I have risen. The Emperor placed a hand on her shoulder, heavy with love. You have risen, my daughter, and one day you will rise higher than us all. That night, Vera stood on the balcony overlooking the city. The stars were bright, the wind cool against her face. Daniel stood beside her, quiet as always. She broke the silence with a question that had long been buried in her heart. Why did you come, Daniel? Why did you choose to help me when so many others refused? Daniel's gaze stayed on the stars. His voice was steady but soft. Because I know what it means to hurt and be told you are nothing. I could not let you believe that lie. She turned to him, her throat tight. You healed more than my body. You healed my heart. Daniel finally looked at her, his expression unreadable, yet his eyes held warmth. No, Vera, you healed yourself. I only reminded you of your strength. For a moment they stood in silence, the bond between them unspoken but unbreakable. Weeks passed and her training continued. But now she did more than walk. She climbed the palace steps with her father. She stood tall during ceremonies. She even visited the city, walking among her people who bowed and wept with joy to see her alive and strong. She learned to smile again. She learned to laugh again. She learned to live again. And each night when the pain returned, she did not curse it. She whispered to herself, I am not broken. I rise still. Then came the day she chose her vow. In the great hall before her father, the nobles, and the people, she stood proudly. No chair, no crutch, only her own strength. Her gown shimmered like the dawn. Her crown gleamed in the torchlight, and her voice carried through the chamber. My people, she said, her tone clear, strong despite the ache in her ribs. For years you saw me as cursed, as broken. I let myself believe it. But no more. I am not broken. I am your princess. And I vow this to you, so long as I draw breath, I will stand with you, walk with you, and rise with you. The hall thundered with cheers. The people wept, the nobles bowed, and her father's eyes shone with pride. Daniel stood at the edge of the hall, silent, unseen by many. But Vera's eyes found him, and for a moment the world around her faded. She smiled, a smile filled with gratitude and something deeper, something that words could never capture. That night, after the celebrations ended, Vera walked with Daniel in the quiet gardens. The stars above were endless, the flowers glowing faintly in the moonlight. She stopped by the fountain, her breath light, her face glowing with joy. Do you know what they call me now? She asked playfully. Daniel tilted his head. What? They call me the princess who rose. A small smile touched his lips. It suits you. She looked at him, her eyes soft, her voice low. I could never have risen without you. He shook his head gently. No, Vera. You rose because you chose to. You always had the strength. You only needed someone to remind you. Her heart ached, not from pain, but from the weight of gratitude, of connection, of something more than words. For a long moment they stood in silence, the sound of water and night birds surrounding them, and in that silence Vera realized something. She was no longer the princess who lived in fear, no longer the girl trapped by pain. She was the princess who had risen, and with Daniel by her side she knew she would never fall again.